Welcome everyone to another coffee tasting. I'm your host Aaron Taylor, and today we're tasting another small lot coffee. Today we're tasting the Papua New Guinea Ulya. With this coffee, it's going to be a sun-dried coffee from a region that doesn't normally sun-dry their coffee. So this is going to be an extra special coffee because we're getting a coffee that's processed a little different than the region typically processes their beans. So we're going to talk a little bit about that after we do our tasting. So let's go ahead and start the brew. For those of you guys who are joining the live stream for the first time, welcome. Thank you guys for joining. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button down below. That really helps me make this channel that much better. Allows me to add more content and create more videos. So hit that like and subscribe button down below. I greatly appreciate it. For those of you guys returning, welcome back. I am honored to have you guys for multiple live streams. Super awesome that you guys come back. With this particular coffee, we're going to get a lot of bright notes. We have brown sugar with a little bit of eucalyptus. And so because we're getting those, the reason why we're getting those bright notes is because the fact that this coffee is a sun-dried coffee. So Papua New Guinea is an Indonesian coffee. And so normally with Indonesian coffees, we get a semi-wash coffee. And when you do a semi-wash on the beans, what happens is you're gonna get more of a bourbon mouthfeel. A lot more of those roasty, earthy flavors are gonna come forward. And so with this particular cup of coffee, it's going to be a sun-dried bean. And what that means is they lay it out in the sun in beds, and it turns into pretty much a coffee raisin. And then what happens is those oils inside the cherry get absorbed into the bean, and so that's where a lot of those citrusy notes are coming from, is the fact that we're sun drying the coffee. So the way we process our coffee and how we take the cherry off the bean is going to affect the flavor. So with like Latin American coffees, we get like a full wash where they sit in a bath until the pulp falls off. In Africa, we get a typically a sun-dried method where they lay it out, and because you have that drier climate, it allows you to do this a lot easier. Not as much maintenance goes into it. With the region that this coffee comes from, you normally can't do sun-drying method because of the amount of moisture in the air. So it doesn't really allow you to be able to sun-dry your beans. You can sun-dry your beans in these regions of the world, but because of the moisture, it's going to be very meticulous. It requires a lot of work, a lot of care because of that moisture. You can the cherry on your bean can succumb to mold, ruining your entire batch. And so it's risky, that is for sure. So what's interesting about this coffee right already is just by brewing it, I can smell those roasty notes. It's almost got like a peppery smell. Very, very interesting. So with the pour over, we're gonna get a lot more of those bright notes. With the Chemex, it's going to be more of a balanced cup. And then same with the French press, we're going to get more of a balanced cup, but the flavor notes are going to be on a more intense level than the Chemex. So for those of you guys who are joining the live stream for the first time, we like to brew our coffee 3 different ways. And the reason why we brew our coffee 3 different ways is to really explore the different flavors you get from the coffee, from the same coffee, but from different brew methods. So the way you brew your coffee is going to impact the flavor, like I was just saying a moment ago, where the French press, we're going to have those intense flavors, but it's going to be more of a balanced cup of coffee. While the pour over, we're going to get a lot more of those bright citrus, roasty notes that come forward. And then with the Chemex, because it's a triple paper filter, those bright citrusy notes are going to take more of a back seat and allow some more of those bitters to come forward, making more of a balanced cup of coffee. So when you brew a pour over and a Chemex, you guys, you want to make sure that you let your coffee bloom when you start the brew. So what blooming is you want to really saturate all the grinds with just a little bit of water, and then what that does is it allows the air bubbles or any trapped air in between the grinds to rise up to the top. And you want that to happen because if you pour too much water right away, you're going to force all the water towards the bottom of the filter, creating a barrier, an air barrier. And what that's going to do is it's going to cause your brew time to be much longer than what it's supposed to be. So making sure you let your coffee bloom, making sure you got the right amount of water, proportion and grind and freshness is very important to making sure that your cup of coffee tastes the way it's supposed to. Because you could have a really good cup of coffee and brew it wrong and it'll taste horrible, and then your opinion of that coffee is based off of a improper brew. And so making sure that we brew our coffee is very important, not just for the personal flavor of our cup of coffee, but making sure that we pay proper respect to the people who grew this coffee, because a lot of work goes into growing coffee and making sure that we get the right flavors that the farmers want us to taste is very important, because that's like us paying tribute to the work that they do is really getting those full flavors and appreciating everything about it. All right. So this coffee, without me having to bring this coffee up to my nose and smell it, I'm already getting some very, very intense, like almost a peppery scent. And it's very bright and roasty. So we're going to go ahead and taste the pour over first, you guys. Wow, so this is a very, very bright coffee. It's got those slight pepper notes. It's got like a roasty scent to it. Not a whole lot of bitters going on here. Oh wow, that is that is an interesting cup of coffee. Very complex, that is for sure. All right, so I'm definitely getting that roasted pineapple flavor that we get from the Papua New Guinea, and then there's a subtle brown sugar sweetness, and then we're getting those strong floral flavors, which is that eucalyptus. So we're getting it in the pour over. What's primarily driving the cup of coffee is those strong floral flavors with that little bit of bright peppery flavor, and the peppery flavor is like that little bit of pineapple, the roasted pineapple flavor, because it's got a little bit of brightness to it, but roasty. It almost gives it a pepper quality. Very, very interesting. It's very interesting to get a coffee that tastes like there's almost pepper added to it, but there's no pepper added to it. So that's a very, very smooth cup of coffee. I would definitely suggest that the pour over for like a dinner time, just because we're getting that peppery mouthfeel, that peppery flavor would really complement like a good steak or mashed potatoes or something like that really good, or maybe even some pork chops. Pork chops and a cup of coffee. All right. So now we're going to taste the Chemex, you guys. With the Chemex, it's going to be a triple paper filter. And what that's doing is it's going to absorb more oils. And with more of those oils and more sediments being filtered out of our coffee, we're going to get a cleaner cup of coffee. And then it's also going to impact the flavor. So with the way it's going to impact the flavor is some of those bright roasty notes, that pepper flavor that we got right off the bat, aren't going to be as intense. They're still going to be there, definitely, especially with this cup of coffee, but it's not going to be as predominant as it was in the pour over. So immediately, what I can tell you right off the bat with the smell of this coffee is the pepper notes that we get from the aroma are definitely not as intense just right off the bat, like noticeably different. That's really good. So what's happening with the Chemex is we're still getting that pepper flavor, but it's definitely not as intense. It doesn't like grab onto the tongue right when you first drink it like the pour over does, where you're just immediately slammed with that peppery flavor. This you're getting that nice subtle pepper flavor, but that eucalyptus, the floral flavors are really coming through. So we've got like a really floral cup of coffee with a slight pepper mouthfeel, and it's a very, very clean cup of coffee, nice and smooth. That is really, really good. That's so if you guys like a good like dark tea, like a good black tea, I would definitely suggest the Papua New Guinea on the Chemex. And the reason why I suggest the Papua New Guinea on the Chemex is because those eucalyptus floral notes are really coming forward on the Chemex, giving it a really strong floral tea like flavor. Really good. That would be really good with some sweetener, that is for sure. Bring forward some more of those floral flavors. All right, so with the French press, we're getting more sediments and more oils, and that's going to impact our flavor. We're going to get more of those bitter notes, some more of those brown sugar notes. Those are the like a bitter maple flavor, alongside the pepper notes and the floral notes. Wow. So with the French press, it's very interesting. We're getting much brighter peppery notes. The pepper notes are still there, but because of the that bright pineapple citrus notes are really coming forward. The pepper notes aren't as intense, but then we're still getting a lot of those eucalyptus floral notes as well. So this is a very bright cup of coffee. It's probably one of the brighter French presses that I've ever had. It's got a lot of citrus notes, a lot of floral notes, not a whole lot of bitters. The um, the maple bitters from the brown sugar flavors that we're getting in there are kind of subtle, but because it's a brown sugar notes, it doesn't have a whole lot of influence on the cup of coffee. So what's really driving this coffee right now is that slight peppery mouthfeel from the roasted pineapple and the eucalyptus floral flavors. And that is a very complex cup of coffee. It's still wild to me that there are strong pepper notes to it. It's just interesting how a coffee can taste like there's pepper added to it when literally we've added nothing to it. It's just the flavors that we get from the land and the processing method and the varietals that they used with these beans. Not my favorite cup of coffee, guys, just because I tend to lean more towards the milk chocolate nutty notes of Latin American coffee. But for this particular blend, really good. Um, Better than what I would typically choose for the Indonesian cups of coffees, because the Indonesian coffees tend to be on the darker side, especially when we come to the roasting process. And so I tend to lean more towards the lighter roast coffees. But because this is a sun-dried coffee, we are getting lighter notes than we normally do from this region. So it makes it a much easier cup of coffee to drink. It's not too bitter. We don't have those intense earthy notes that we would normally get from this region of the world. So it is a very nice Indonesian cup of coffee that I like when it comes to this part of the world and the coffee that they have to offer. But still, not my favorite coffee, really good. If I had to choose a brew method for this cup of coffee, though, I would definitely go with the Chemex, just because the flavor notes aren't as intense as they are on the French press and the pour over. And the reason why is just because I'm not a big flavor or a big I'm not a big flavor. I'm not a big fan of the flavors that this cup of coffee has to offer. Like I said, I tend to lean more towards those milk chocolate and nutty notes. With this, we're getting intense, bright peppery notes with a little bit of eucalyptus floral notes. Um, so that is my reasoning, and the reason why I chose the Chemex is because those flavor notes aren't as intense, making it a much cleaner cup of coffee, smoother for myself. Um, so that's how I prefer the Papua New Guinea Ulya. Excellent, excellent. So with the Papua New Guinea Ulya, well, with Papua New Guinea coffee, period, it made its way into this part of the world around the 1890s, shortly after Jamaica Blue Mountain started yielding their first couple crops. But it wasn't until the 1920s is when the farmers of Papua New Guinea really started to transition from their normal crops to coffee. And then um, it wasn't until the 1960s is when the infrastructure started to rebuild and they started to make more money out of coffee, and farmers started to really expand in the coffee field. And there wasn't that big of a demand in the beginning, and then you have the a major decline in the 1960s when it comes to uh, roast or not roasteries, but plantations. And so before the 1960s, you had farms being run by plantations that were just large farms growing lots of coffee. And then in the 1960s, you have the decline of plantations, and then you start seeing small lot farmers growing coffee, which is very important and like a major development role in the community of Papua New Guinea, because it allowed for the farmers and the people and the families that grow coffee in this region of the world to make more money and create a more sustainable lifestyle. So that is one of the major important parts about small lot coffees and us being able to share the stories about coffee is how it impacts the people around the world. And so with in 1960s we start to have the rise of small lot farmers starting to grow coffee, but it wasn't until the 1970s is when the demand for coffee started to rise, and we start getting like people who really want like grade A gourmet Arabica beans. And then in the 80s is when the coffee boom really hit. And by this time, coffee is in such demand and so popular around the world that Papua New Guinea went from pretty much hardly exporting any coffee to it being its second export from this particular region of the world, and that's next to their palm olive oil or palm oil. And so you have palm oil being their main export of their main money, and now you have coffee as their second. So you have palm oil and coffee, and then you have metal exports, like rare mineral exports. So coffee plays a major part in the economy of Papua New Guinea, and then because of the increase in demand and the demand for high quality Arabica beans starts to go up in the 1980s, and then you have Starbucks and other coffee companies dedicated to supplying these high quality Arabica beans. A lot of these farmers are thriving because of the fact that coffee is a much easier crop to grow than other crops. It's more sustainable, and the demand for it is increasing. So we have this crop that's helping farmers in a part of the world where they might not have been able to make enough money to sustain their families, and now they have a crop that they can rely on to make the money and be able to, like I say, create that sustainable livelihood, and just live a better life than they would have without it. So super awesome, the impacts that coffee has on the people that grow the coffee and where it comes from. Super cool. And then in the 1990s is when a lot of the farmers were impacted with rust disease. And so you have rust disease starting to migrate to higher altitudes because of global warming. And so we have farmers that are losing out on their livelihoods and stuff. And when you have people who grow coffee and that's the source of their income, if you get rust disease and it impacts your entire farm, uh, you're losing out on your entire crop for the entire year. And some of these families, they only have like what they call gardens, and it's only up to like 20 coffee trees. And so if you're impacted by rust disease and it spreads out, that's only 20 trees that can be easily infected with this disease. And so there's a lot of science going on right now, especially in Costa Rica, that involves this rust disease and combating global warming and climate change, and making sure that farmers can continue to grow coffee sustainably and be able to make the money that they need to live the livelihoods that they want to live. So very important. That is how coffee affects the people who grow it, and like how we can pay tribute to the people who grow the coffee is to make sure that we brew our coffee correctly and to learn the stories and to learn a little bit about the people who grow our coffee so that we know how much work that goes into growing this coffee. Especially this particular cup of coffee, because Papua New Guinea Ulya, at least this year's blend, is a sun-dried coffee. And with this particular blend of coffee, we don't normally get to sun-dry our coffee because it comes from a more tropical region of the world. We have higher moisture than other regions, and because of that, when you lay out your cherries to dry in the sun, they become very susceptible to mold because of the excess moisture. So what the farmers have to do is they have to constantly monitor these beds of cherries and constantly rotate them, flip them, monitor them. And so a lot of work goes into this particular bag of coffee. And then they're taking a major risk because with this particular processing method, it relies heavily on the atmosphere and weather, and just being able to be on top of the rotating of the cherries. And so this particular process method, especially in the area of the world that they did this method, has a high risk. But with this high risk, they were able to produce an exceptional cup of coffee. We have very, very complex. If you guys enjoyed today's coffee tasting, go ahead and hit the link down below. That is going to be a list of videos that I've done in the past. The video above is just a video that YouTube thinks that you might like. Have a great day, you guys. See you this Tuesday.